The question of the racial identity of ancient Egyptian pharaohs, especially figures such as Ramesses II, has long captivated scholars, historians, and the public alike. Rooted in both modern curiosity and ancient intrigue, this subject draws upon disciplines as diverse as genetics, archaeology, art history, and biblical studies. Recent advances in DNA technology, coupled with ongoing interpretations of ancient art, have added new layers to the conversation, sometimes fueling the claim that biblical pharaohs like Ramesses were Black Nubians. To truly understand the veracity and complexity of this assertion, it is essential to examine the evidence in detail, appreciating both the scientific insights and the broader historical context. Turning first to the genetic evidence, the study of ancient Egyptian mummies has become increasingly sophisticated over the past few decades. DNA extracted from mummified remains offers tantalizing clues about the ancestry and relationships of Egypt's rulers. One of the most frequently cited studies involves Ramesses III, a prominent pharaoh of the 20th dynasty. Analysis of his Y chromosome revealed that it belongs to haplogroup E1b1a, a lineage commonly found among sub-Saharan African populations today. This discovery has been interpreted by some as a strong indication of a genetic link between Egypt's royal line and populations further south, particularly in regions historically associated with Nubia. Nubia, the region immediately south of ancient Egypt, stretching along the Nile in what is today southern Egypt and northern Sudan, has a rich and ancient history intertwined with that of its northern neighbor. For millennia, Nubia and Egypt engaged in complex relationships, sometimes marked by warfare and domination, other times by trade, intermarriage, and cultural exchange. The Nubians were renowned for their prowess in archery, their wealth in gold, and their own impressive kingdom, Kush, which would eventually rise to rule Egypt as the 25th dynasty, the so-called Kushite or Black Pharaohs. The presence of haplogroup E1b1a in Ramesses III's genetic profile has prompted some scholars and enthusiasts to suggest a Nubian ancestry for the royal family, reaching back into earlier dynasties. It's important to note, however, that Ramesses III lived centuries after the time of Ramesses II, and the lineages of different dynasties could vary significantly. Still, the genetic proximity of Egypt to sub-Saharan Africa is not in question. Egypt's ancient population, situated at the crossroads of Africa, Asia, and the Mediterranean, was likely diverse, reflecting centuries of migration, conquest, and exchange. Yet, while such DNA evidence is compelling, it is not definitive proof that all biblical pharaohs or even all members of the Ramesside dynasty were of Black Nubian descent in a strict modern sense. The genetic history of Northeast Africa is complex, and haplogroups alone do not capture the entirety of an individual's ancestry or appearance. Moreover, the preservation of DNA in mummies is fraught with challenges. Contamination, degradation, and the limited number of samples all mean that genetic studies must be interpreted with caution. Still, the presence of sub-Saharan haplogroups among royal mummies does reinforce the close relationship between ancient Egypt and the broader African continent. Turning to artistic evidence, the visual culture of ancient Egypt provides another window into the question of identity and perception. Egyptian art was highly stylized and symbolic, often serving political and religious purposes rather than offering naturalistic portraits. In tomb paintings, reliefs, and statuary, Egyptians depicted themselves with reddish-brown skin, Nubians with darker brown or black skin, and other neighboring peoples with distinctive features and garments. However, these conventions were not always rigid, and the boundaries between Egyptian and Nubian identities could blur, especially as individuals from Nubia rose to prominence in Egyptian society. Artifacts from the New Kingdom period, when Egypt was at the height of its imperial power, frequently depict interactions with Nubians. One notable example is a ceremonial handle from the time of Ramesses II, showing a lion subduing a Nubian. Such imagery symbolized the pharaoh's dominance over foreign lands, reinforcing his power and divine right to rule. Yet these depictions must be approached critically. They are not literal representations of individuals, but rather political statements crafted to convey authority and order in a cosmological sense. There are also instances where Nubians are shown participating in Egyptian court life, serving as soldiers, diplomats, or even high officials. In some cases, Nubian women became members of the royal harem or wives of pharaohs, further entwining the bloodlines of the two peoples. Over time, especially during periods of Nubian rule, the visual distinction between Egyptian and Nubian became even less pronounced. The evidence from art is therefore both suggestive and ambiguous. While ancient Egyptians acknowledged and depicted differences between themselves and their southern neighbors, the reality of personal identities and relationships was far more fluid. Royal families, especially over centuries, would have incorporated members from various backgrounds, including Nubian ancestry. Artistic conventions, meanwhile, served to reinforce state ideology rather than provide ethnographic documentation. But what of the biblical narrative? The pharaohs of the Exodus story, often identified with Ramesses II or his immediate successors, loom large in the Western imagination. The Bible itself does not specify the ethnicity of these rulers, and Egyptian records from the Ramesside period make no mention of the events described in Exodus. Nevertheless, the intersection of biblical tradition and historical inquiry has led many to search for any clues that might connect the biblical account with the known rulers of Egypt. The identification of Ramesses II as the pharaoh of the Exodus is based largely on the mention of the city of Ramesses in the biblical text, a capital built during his reign. While this is a plausible historical anchor, it remains speculative. The Egyptians left abundant records, but none that directly correspond to the biblical events. As such, the racial or ethnic identity of the biblical pharaohs remains a matter of interpretation, shaped by both archaeological evidence and the assumptions of later readers. Modern discussions of the race of Egypt's pharaohs are often influenced by contemporary concerns about representation, identity, and historical justice. For many people of African descent, the recognition of Egypt's African roots is a matter of pride and cultural affirmation, correcting centuries of misrepresentation and erasure. The tendency in the 19th and early 20th centuries to depict ancient Egyptians as white or Mediterranean reflects the biases of those times, not the realities of ancient history. In recent decades, scholarship has increasingly recognized the diversity of ancient Egypt. The civilization was, from its inception, an African culture, deeply connected to the Nile Valley and the peoples of the surrounding regions. While Egypt also interacted extensively with the Levant, the Mediterranean, and the Near East, its population was always shaped by its African geography. The royal families, too, were not immune to these influences, and the genetic evidence, while incomplete, supports the view that Egypt's rulers included ancestors from the south. It is thus plausible, indeed likely, that some Egyptian pharaohs, including those mentioned in biblical traditions, had significant Nubian ancestry. The presence of sub-Saharan African haplogroups among royal mummies, the close political and social ties between Egypt and Nubia, and the artistic depiction of Nubians at court all point to a reality more complex than simple racial categories allow. The ancient world did not operate according to modern definitions of race. Identities were shaped by language, culture, geography, and power as much as by appearance or ancestry. At the same time, it is important not to reduce the history of Egypt or Nubia to a single narrative. Egypt was a great civilization, spanning thousands of years and dozens of dynasties, each with its own unique characteristics. The racial identity of any given pharaoh is best understood as part of this broader tapestry, shaped by the ebb and flow of peoples, ideas, and influences across the Nile Valley and beyond. In conclusion, while DNA analysis and the study of ancient art provide valuable insights, they do not yield simple answers. The evidence suggests that ancient Egypt was a diverse and dynamic society with close ties to Nubia and sub-Saharan Africa. Some pharaohs, including possibly those associated with biblical narratives, almost certainly had Nubian ancestry. Artistic and genetic evidence both point to a blending of peoples and cultures, challenging modern preconceptions about race and identity in the ancient world. Ultimately, the story of Egypt and its rulers is a story of complexity, connection, and change, a testament to the enduring richness of Africa's past and its contributions to the heritage of humanity. As our tools for studying the past become ever more sophisticated, we move closer to understanding the true diversity of ancient Egypt, an understanding that honors both its African roots and its universal significance. And if you're still here, maybe your soul just got touched in the deepest place. At Tales of Black, every story is a ritual, a reminder that some memories are not written in books, but in bone and blood. If this story stirred something in you, share it with someone still wandering. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. And if there's a legend, a memory, or a haunting you want told, leave it in the comments. Maybe your story is the next one summoned in the ritual.